Turtle Tracks podcast. I'm your host, Brian Van Hooker, and I'm here with Peter DeCicco, who was one of the writers on the 2012 series.
Hi, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Great.
So, as much as I'd like to start in the beginning here, I have one question. What happened to Pigeon Pete in that cartoon?
I don't like to talk about Pigeon Pete.
Was there any sort of revelation as to what that was?
I like to leave that up to interpretation. I will say this is just because it didn't make it in the show, but there was a version of the where at the end of I guess it would be the end of season 3, and it was repeated again in season 4. But basically, like, there was a version where, you know, Pigeon Pete was one of the casualties in that battle with the Triceratons.
Okay.
But technically, we didn't see it. So, and I think you do see him, like, fly away at the end with the rest of them.
Oh.
And I think it's like the real world explanation is we just had so many characters, and after we added, we wanted to keep bringing Mondo Gecko back. After we added him to it just got to be like one too many characters. So it was just, we thought it would just be a funny way to be like, well, something happened to Pigeon Pete. He could be out on vacation. He could have, not made it in the last battle. I like to leave that up to the fans' interpretation. I know Zero and Brandon have their own ideas as to like what really happened to Pigeon Pete, but
it was so teased, and it was like I was like, wait, oh, they must reveal the joke, and then we never got it. And I was like, oh my god, they never told us what happened to Pigeon Pete.
That was intentionally just kind of like left up to interpretation. Just and like I said, it was just because we're like, well, let's we wanted to keep using other characters, and it was just getting hard to use that many characters at once. And I think Pigeon Pete just had to be just because of voice cast and asset wise, and he just became like a an unfortunate casualty of being on a kids cable budget show.
It's funny because I was like, think about it with Mondo, like, for funny but also completely useless character, like, he does kind of, I understand why Mondo would get the preference, Yeah,
and that was the thing, is like, I think having both Mondo and Pigeon Pete there at the same time would be like, well, we have two characters that are basically fulfilling the same function. It's just like the stupid comedy relief, and it just didn't work out.
Gotcha. All right, so mystery not solved.
So fans, feel free to speculate away on however you want Pigeon Pete to have ended his relationship with the Mutanimals.
That's awesome. So then, with that out of the way, tell me a little about yourself. Like, how did you get into Turtles? Become part of the show and all that?
I sort of like, a lot of people did as a fan. I was, I grew up in, with the 80s show. And actually my first exposure to Turtles was actually the 1990 movie. That was the first time I really had like seen, I'd known about it, but I'd never really like seen a Ninja Turtles anything until then. And I just, I loved the movie, and I was like, well, I got to see more of this. And then I started checking out the cartoon. I was a huge fan of the show from way back. And then when Nickelodeon, rebooted the series, I was working at Nick at the time as an executive assistant, and I was like, well, I want to move over to production anyway, and I want to be a writer, so let me find a way to get on that show. And I was lucky enough to just, use the connections I knew to get an interview with the line producer and production manager, and they hired me as a PA, and there off I went. Like within the first couple of months, the script coordinator at the time, Cindy Spackman, who I was friends with, I'm still friends with, but at the time she was the script coordinator, and then she got promoted. She got promoted to staff on another show, and then she recommended me to take over as script coordinator there, and then, the rest is history. I was just, script coordinator from there on out till season 5 when I got promoted full-time to staff.
Oh, wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, so that's my journey. It's one of those things where everyone asks everyone, and I've always asked this question, is like, well, how do you break into the industry? How do you get a writing job? How do you go from here to here? And it's like, well, honestly, like, most of it is just luck and being in the right place at the right time and being ready for when an opportunity arises. And that's kind of what happened. It's really easy to be like, well, I did this and I was working at Nickelodeon and, I knew the script coordinator and then she recommended me and then I got there and then I got a script and then I got promoted, and it's seeing the path from, in hindsight is really easy to see how that happened, but it was, at the time it was all just like random happenstance.
Now, so your first episode you wrote was Metalhead Rewired, which is the episode where Metalhead dies. So can you tell us a little bit about that one?
Yeah, I still get crap for that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, lovingly. I mean, no one really hates me, but it was definitely my debut became this is the guy that's going to kill everybody in this show. That was a fun episode. That was a great episode. That was like my first to write. So I was really happy that Brandon gave that one to me. I don't know what you have in mind that you want me to say about it, but
I just like I was watching the episode yesterday, and I was like, I remember thinking at the time, and again now, like, he dies kind of beautifully, and to the point where I was like, I'm glad they didn't bring him back 3 episodes later. You know what I mean? Like, it was really a meaningful death.
Yeah, I thought so too. It wasn't just like he died just for pathos and to kind of like give them pain. That's one thing that I liked about how he ended it, is he sacrificed himself so that they could survive. And he's a robot, so you can bring him back. And I always wanted to bring him back, down the line. I think there was never any intention of bringing him back right away. I think we never really just got to a point where we could tell that story of rebuilding Metalhead. But it would have, if we did, it would have been a few years down the road. And then when you see the Mutant Apocalypse story at the end of Tales, then you can see, well, at some point in time during that gap between the last kind of episodes that we see of them in the city and the far future after the apocalypse, it's, at some point Donnie had rebuilt him and built like a second version of Metalhead, and then he became Metalhead. And that was a little nod to the IDW comics. Which I loved at the time. Yeah, that was a great arc, and I was like, oh man, I wish we could have done something like that. But that was super dark. I think that comic took the Turtles universe in a way that we just would never have gotten away with. I think, but it was really cool.
Oh, it's brilliant storytelling, and that where they basically kill Donnie, and then he goes into Metalhead's body. I mean, such a fantastic issue.
Oh yeah, no, that was a shocker too, because I was like, wow, I can't believe they actually like killed the Turtles. Like, that's never happened before. Like, they've killed Splinter and they've killed Shredder and they've killed like a lot of the side characters, but they never actually killed one of the Turtles before, and that was crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, how they handled it, I thought was really beautiful. But yeah, I love the Metalhead episode. I always wanted to bring him back, but I never. I couldn't figure out a way to do it, and I don't think, Brandon and Cicco could really figure out a way that made sense for the story either. So it's probably good that we just, kind of left it as like, well, then, he's gone, and now we have to, move on and deal with that.
Yeah, it was nice. Like, it really made him, like, matter, which was cool. Like, I always figured, like, oh, he'll be back. And it was cool, like, really, it doesn't happen until the finale, and then it's even then, like, it's only said, I think it said in passing that it was Metalhead that Donnie's in.
It was basically like, it was kind of a throwaway line where Donnie says like, oh well, when the bomb went off, like, I was psychically connected to Metalhead Mark II, and
yep.
that was like the throwaway line where we're like, okay, well, the robot version of Donnie is Metalhead Mark II, so somehow at some point he rebuilt him, but we just never got to tell that story.
Yeah.
So that's something for for fan speculation and fanfic. That's all sorts of stuff that could be done there.
Well, it's cool. It's such a rich universe. Like, there's so many little, like, if not Pigeon Pete and a bunch of other things. Like, I mean, I wouldn't say in a way that's like unsatisfying. There's unanswered questions, but it's like there's a lot. It's a whole world that they created. Yeah,
I love it, and it's we had a great world to choose from what had already been done before, from the Mirage books and the 80s cartoon and the 2003 series and even some of the stuff that IDW did by the end, bringing in Alopex and that sort of stuff. But then like all of this, the way that Ciro designed the world and really built it out, like that was just brilliant. Like there was just so much fun stuff to do. What I loved about writing on it was that it was not just like this is the only way that you can tell a story. There were stories that were like really comical and really, and some that were really serious. And then you'd have like these cool ninja stories and these cool sci-fi stories and all these different genres that we would kind of mix and match and play around with, which was, I don't think you really get to do in a lot of shows. Usually, if you have a superhero show, it's usually, like one, genre that you have to deal with, or we have a, comedy cartoon show and you have one, genre you have to deal with. But Turtles really kind of like played around with all sorts of things.
Oh yeah, I mean, and they've kind of done that greatly from the start. I mean, just what was it? Just a couple issues into the original comic, they were in outer space. I mean, like immediately it all kind of every genre is possible.
I mean, they really speed ahead really fast because like it's like issue 1, which is it's basically like the size of like 2.
Oh yeah.
So it's like what, 50 pages or something like that.
It's long, yeah.
And so it's like issue 1, like they have like the entire Shredder arc and they kill Shredder, and then issue 2 is the Mousers, and then Splinter disappears, and then it's like issue 4 or something like that is when they go to space.
Yeah,
like,
it's quick.
It's crazy. It's like immediately they go to space. And you're like, okay, well, I guess
yeah.
we're in space.
Yeah. But I like what I like about what the 2012 series did, and with IDW, is that you guys kind of took the best of everything in different ways, and like kind of created these really sort of rich universes built on so much Turtles history.
Oh yeah, thanks. Yeah, I love the way we built out the world in the show.
Yeah, I mean, so let me ask you, after writing, you wrote probably about a dozen episodes, give or take, probably.
Yeah, like 10 or 11 episodes, I think. I have to count them up, but yeah, something like that.
Who was your favorite character to write for?
Karai.
Yeah?
Absolutely. Yeah, 100% Karai. She was absolutely my favorite character. She was just always, from the beginning, she was always just so interesting and had so much just conflict in her and just nuances where you could go, where she was, on the side of the bad guys, but she wasn't a bad guy. Like she had like this dark side to her. But it had all this kind of family drama around her, and always trying to come into her own as a person, but kind of hampered by what her adopted father thought of her, what her real father thought of her, and trying to figure out what her identity was. And I think we did some great stuff with her. I think we did some kind of crappy stuff to her too, I think, along the way.
The serpent.
At a certain point when you kind of like you're like mutating her and throwing her like down the sewers and all that stuff, it's like it gets to be a bit much, but her as a character, she was always a joy to write for. Like I loved every time I got a chance to write for her.
Well, I mean, I think your second episode was "Vengeance Is Mine," which is a great one.
Episode, which was again like at the end of the episode, I basically kind of like do the cartoon killer off by mutating her, and so that's kind of how I got the mutation of like killing characters off every episode. But I loved writing that episode. That was a hard one to write too, because it was my initial pitch, premise outline was really, really long. It was like basically an episode and a half worth of story. So it was really hard to kind of pare that down. At one point, I think after I had kind of written it all out, like I had like this big talk with Brandon. We're like, do we need to break this up into 2 parts, and like which one are you going to write? But I think we managed to figure out how to get it down to 1 episode. And even in the episode, you look at it, and it is kind of all of our episodes have like this 3-act structure, and that one kind of has a 4th act, because there is like this halfway point where she does they do escape from the Foot Clan and they rescue her, and then they go back to Splinter, and there's that midpoint, which is kind of like a nice. Oh, I love that. Like the end of a normal episode, and she's reunited with the guys, and then there's like a little bit of a, I don't really know how much, but there's a little bit of a time skip in there where she's there for a certain period of time, probably just a couple of days, but there's definitely like this kind of fade out where it's like, okay, well, she's actually living with them for a little bit of time. And and then you kind of continue on with the story, and then normally the end of the episode would be like she goes off and she fights the Shredder, and that's the end of the episode. But then there's the whole other chunk where they try to rescue her and she gets mutated. So that was that ended up making the show pretty long, but we got it down to time. I mean, all of our episodes aired at exactly the same running time. But that was one where that was one of the first episodes I wrote that was like super super long after I had written it, and after they boarded it out, I was like, wow, I kind of put too much in there. That's why I had to start reining myself in. But I think I just wanted to keep writing her. But I loved her arc in that, and I think I loved it because she does take the initiative and all that stuff. It's I to this day I do feel bad about mutating her, because it is kind of a crappy thing to happen to her. But still at the same time she is kind of taking the initiative to be like, I need to go after Shredder, and I'm making this choice to attack him. Even though I love that that's kind of her flaw. I think if she had just listened to Splinter a little bit, she would have just been like, okay, I'm just going to calm down a little bit. I'm like not going to go after Shredder right away, and we're going to think about a different way to do this, and things might have turned out differently. But she's a little bit of a hothead that way, which I always liked.
Oh yeah, I mean that ending is heartbreaking, but I mean to me like that little piece of downtime in the middle like is just a beautiful like little moment with her and Splinter. Like it and if you think about it now, I'm just realizing this now, like that's really the only time that Splinter and his daughter are kind of reunited before he dies.
Yeah, that is kind of I love that moment, and that was a hard thing where it's like I think there was when they were editing it, there was a brief discussion about like how can we trim stuff back, and what out of like the training sequence and the conversation can we cut out to kind of just shorten the episode, not because they weren't working, because they were always working really great, but it was just kind of trying to shorten the episode. And that was a section that everyone was always like, no, we got to keep this, because that's like the heart of the episode. Because I love that, because that's one of those moments where just that little training sequence, like after she reunites with them and they have that hug, and then there's a little training sequence, and you see like, oh, this is them all just living together as a family, and this could have been like a great, like this is how they should just be from now on. Like this and then we pop that bubble and take it all away from them.
Oh, it's so sad. Like it's just like, oh, it ends so painfully. It's like
I still like, it pains me every time I'm like, oh, I can't believe I did this. It's so it hurts so much, but it was still really good. I love that episode.
Where did that idea come from? Did it come from you?
No, I mean, the idea of mutating Karaki, I think, came from Cicco, and then the mapping out the story was between me and Brandon. So basically every episode, it's like Brandon and Cicco would kind of talk to each other and figure out what the episode was going to be about, and kind of get a general idea for it, and then Brandon would kind of start mapping out what each episode, the story-wise, would be. And so I worked with him on figuring out exactly what would, the beats of the story would be. But as far as the end game, like her getting mutated, that was all Cicco.
Oh wow. So yeah, I mean, like, and then like after that, I mean, we still got some time before Splinter passes away, but it's just sort of this really hard journey she has up until probably the end, when she's kind of chilling out with Shinigami.
Yeah, I mean, it's really not until I think there's I guess like after they defeat the Triceratons and Karai's kind of like disappeared for half a season. We always said like, oh well, she just kind of like takes a hike and decides to just go back to Japan, take a vacation for 6 months while all that nonsense with the Triceratons is happening.
Oh yeah.
And they're like, okay, well she's broken through that. And she's like, I just can't deal with this nonsense anymore. And then after, and there's a little bit of a break after they kind of defeat the Triceratons and Splinter, injures Shredder, and then that gives us, Karai the opportunity to kind of, all right, I'm going to come back and rebuild the Foot Clan in a meaningful way. So there's a little bit of a downtime for her, and I think that I think was always like fun to add to her character, is really kind of bringing in the a lot of the Mirage origins, which was she was became the head of the Foot Clan basically after the original Shredder died, and she took over, and that was the version where she wasn't even related to Shredder.
Yep.
I think it was what was it? Was it 2003? That was the first time that she was Shredder's daughter. I think so.
You might be right. Yeah.
Yeah, because before that she was just basically like
his ward or something.
His heir in the sense that she took over the Foot Clan after him, but they were never really related.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think in 2003 was the first time that she was his daughter. And then we just kind of ran with it. We're like, well, what if she's Splinter's daughter, and really all this other backstory with Tang Shen and stuff. But yeah, I always loved every time that we got to bring her in, and then introducing Shin Megami was just which was really fun. Like she was a fun character.
Oh yeah. Honestly, I love the twist of her being Splinter's daughter. I think I kind of figured it out. Maybe a handful of episodes before it came about. I think it was just like, I was like, Splinter never had a daughter before. And eventually I was like, I wonder if that's Karai. And it worked out brilliantly. I love that.
Oh, good. Yeah, I'm glad you like that. That was one of those things that, unfortunately, there was at the time there was some kind of leak.
Oh, really?
Yeah, before the show came out, an early version of the character description somehow got leaked online. I have no idea how it happened. And there was a version where I think there was a version where Karai was called Miwa. And then it was just very apparent that it was split, but then when, I think when they changed the name, it was oh, her real name is Miwa, but she's going by Karai, then that means that she must be, I think,
yeah.
few fans that figured it out just because of that leak. But there was still that, I think that question mark that I think, brought people through if nobody had kind of was aware of that. But yeah, we tried planting those seeds early on, but I really just playing with the, oh yeah, she's his daughter, and I think we pretty much right away say oh yeah, she's Shredder's daughter, and then we don't even reveal that to Leo and the Turtles until a couple episodes later. I think in season 1 where they're I thought you were just this other just random person that wasn't related to Shredder, and now you're related to him, and this is really bad.
Right.
After Leo has this whole relationship with her, trying to be you should join us, you should leave the Foot Clan. But dude, she's never gonna do that because that's her dad. Yeah.
And then it's oh, but you're also kind of her sister, so that's also weird.
Yeah, and then that happened. That was also weird. That became a whole fandom shipping thing where oh well they're really brother and sister, but is it really that way because they were adopted but also they weren't raised together, but how does that work? And it's I'm not touching that.
Yeah.
Can ship whoever they want to ship, but I'm not touching whether they're biologically compatible or not.
And I gotta say, Splinter's backstory that you guys did with that, in addition to the Miwa thing, but also having when they go back in time and they see young Hamato Yoshi, it's he's really not the kindly guy you'd think he'd be.
Yeah, and I always like that, looking at, because and also he's not a bad guy. You just see him when he's just younger and more reckless. And I always like when you have a character that's held up to be this kind of this paragon. That they can't be that perfect. They have to have some flaw, and obviously if he was perfect, then there would never have been conflict between him and Shredder. You have to have there was a reason that they have this conflict together, and there was tension between him and Shredder because of Tang Shen, and neither of them could really let it go until it was too late. And I think I love our version of Splinter a lot. So I think that he kind of became who he became because he of that tragedy. But even I love that scene in Tale of the Yokai where it's right before Shredder confronts him, where it's Hamato Yoshi and Tang Shen just kind of on the little balcony of their house, and they have that moment where it's no, I've been going really, I can't remember exactly what he says, but he says it's something to the effect of I've been focusing too much on, the clan, and you're right. Like you and Miwa are my life. So like I choose you, and it's like, and then he has that moment of clarity, like right before Orokusaki just comes in and be like, all right, I'm calling you out, like like we're going, and it's like, well, it's too late. Like there's nothing you can do. Like it's not like like Tang Shin is her own person. She's not just gonna like go to you because you challenge him to a duel. Like this isn't
right.
This isn't like ancient times, like where you can the women don't have any kind of like choice in the matter. Like she loves Hamato Yoshi. Like they were having problems because of his dedication to the clan, and she didn't want to bring Miwa up in that violent life. It had nothing to do with you, dude.
Right.
And he all tries to like play like the good guy and be like, oh, I'm gonna leave the clan for you, and be like, dude, back off. But I like how he played around with that, whereas you really think that, oh, well, maybe Shredder's kind of a good guy. Maybe Splinter isn't as great as he was, but I think in the essence of their characters, like Hamato Yoshi really always was like the good one, and Orokusaki always was a little on the bad side. But I do have that kind of like, oh, in another world, if they could have just gotten along and put their past behind them, that would have been great.
Yeah, it's cool. Also, what I liked about that is you see quite a bit of Raph in young Hamato Yoshi, which I liked.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That was cool.
He has that hot-headedness that. And I think that plays into going back and watching the first season of the show, like when Splinter's telling him about his anger, and that's what brought him down, and Raph needs to master that. You can see that's Splinter learned that lesson the hard way, and that's what he's trying to impart onto his sons. And,
oh yeah. Like I said, that's one of the reasons why, there's two different origins for Splinter. He's either the rat in the cage, or he's the guy. And as much as, it kind of changes the properties of the mutagen or whatever, I kind of prefer him being the guy, because it gives him a richer history, and, you can do more with that. But I've never quite bought the idea that this little non-mutant rat retained all of this information from martial arts, and then was able to utilize it later. Like that part of it.
Yeah, that was always just one of those, it's just like, it's comic book logic. It's
yeah.
Like, oh, well, yeah, it's like he got smarter and, became humanoid after the mutagen, and he somehow recalled when he was a rat, and then he mimicked all of the ninja skills, and it's like, all right. I mean, I feel like the mutagen is inconsistent, but it's like it is unstable, like magic, hand wavium, as you call them. It's like it kind of does whatever you need it to do for the plot. Like that is a little bit more acceptable, I think, to me. But I think both ways work in their own way, but I do prefer the Splinter being starting off as human, just because you have that history. Otherwise, it's just he's just kind of mimicking what he thought he learned from his human master, which is kind of unrelated, and there's not that kind of connection. I think I think the IDW comics did a great job of really flipping that on its head. The Turtles and Splinter, started off as Turtles and a rat, but they're somehow, with the magic of the mutagen, they're also kind of the reincarnated spirits of these ninjas from like an age past. So I love that idea that they did. Like that, I thought that was a fun way to kind of tip that on its head and not be like, oh, well, we're going to just do the same. Either he's a rat that gets mutated and he learns from Hamato Yoshi, or he's Hamato Yoshi and he turns into a rat. Like, I think that was a fun way to do that too. But yeah, I always liked that version. There's some things about like the rat becoming Splinter and the rivalry with Shredder that depending on the version that is told, doesn't always work. I think. But I think that's a little bit of a a preference. But I think that's why I like the 1990 movie works, because I mean, there is that little bit of a rivalry because Shredder cut off Splinter's ear.
He scratched his face. Yeah.
So Splinter kind of remembers that, but also like they only have like that last scene together, so there isn't like this. We have years of history building up to this final battle. It's okay. Well, here is just like this one battle that's like it means something to Splinter, and it only means something to Shredder just because like he just can't let go of the past.
Right. Well, I mean, like and honestly, and I love everything Turtles, but there is nothing I like more than that 1990 movie. That's my very favorite #1 Turtles thing. And but there's still that one moment where you see that little rat puppet doing ninja moves, and I'm like, yeah, that one I have a little trouble with, like this.
Yeah, it's true, and I can watch it now, and I can kind of wave my hand and be like, well, it's fine because it's a flashback and it's kind of stylized.
Okay.
Like I kind of pretend to be like, well, it looks kind of wonky because, partly because of the technology of the time, and partly because like, well, it's a flashback anyway, and it's done in this stylized way where you have like all these actors in like with just black backgrounds, and they're kind of like not really in real sets, and it's all slightly off anyway. So I kind of like, I can kind of still accept it in that way, but it is still a little. I agree. It's still a little like, that's a little weird. You can tell it's a puppet, but
yeah. And I mean, like, that's
whereas when I look at the, I watched the movie again recently, and you look at that Splinter puppet.
Oh, he's amazing.
That he's amazing. Like I think the first time I saw it, I don't think I quite realized that he was a full puppet. Like I always thought there was something about him that was like there had to be somebody inside him. Like no, it's like full-on puppet. Like it's really, I mean, that's what's brilliant about that first movie is that all the masks and all the puppets were all done by Henson. And
yeah.
Like and you can just tell like the budget that they put into that, and they made it look really good. I love that first movie. I do think that's probably still my favorite piece of Turtles as well, just because that's the first one that I ever saw, and it's just so well done.
Oh, and like the detail in those suits. I mean, that's. For those who don't know, behind that Splinter puppet is Elmo, is Kevin Clash, like controlling every bit of it. Like that's so cool. And like to me, the puppetry still holds up as being like more real feeling than these newer movies did.
Yeah, I mean, I think so too. I think CG's gotten to the point where it's become more photoreal, but there's something about just the tactileness and the interactivity with the environment that you have in the puppet that's like, it just feels more real. Like there's something about it that like that it's just a puppet, intellectually, but it also like there's something that the artist brings it to life somehow. Whereas like CG characters, I think sometimes they're great, but sometimes you can they only work if the person who's animating it or if it's motion capture, if the person that's like doing the mocap for it is really doing the performance right. Mm-hmm. But otherwise, like you're building a CG character is kind of like you're just from ground zero. Like but doing a puppet, like you have some 1-to-1 ratio between like the performance and what the puppet gives out.
And what's cool is like I feel like with Thanos and Iron Man, you have these characters that you need to do CG, otherwise you're not going to sell it. But like exactly. Turtles are pretty grounded. They're not quite as fantastic. Like they're fantastic in what they are, but like they're not going on such crazy adventures that we can't do puppetry.
Well, yeah, and also with the Turtles, like I think they're still if you were to just be like, oh well, they're all the same characters, but they're human. Like they still need to perform human acts. Like they're like all of their skills. They're not like they're not Superman. Like they're not exactly like they're not Thanos. They're not Iron Man. They're not flying around. They're not doing like these weird, crazy, impossible things. I mean, they're kind of impossible, but no more impossible than like some of the stuff that like Bruce Lee does.
Yeah.
It's like you watch a Bruce Lee movie, you're like, well, that I can't believe he did that, and like and he did, but it was but it's like, well, yeah, you just have like if it's a guy in a suit doing the same stuff, it's like and the only time that it breaks the reality is if like the suit doesn't work.
Yeah.
But if the performer makes the suit work, then it's like it's great. Like I love it. But yeah, I mean I'm all about the classic Turtles and suit stuff. But that being said, our show was 100% CG, so I thought the animators did an amazing job.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
Yeah.
And the choreography in that show, like it seemed like it was a cartoon, but it was still like the action sequence is really well thought out. Like, it was fantastic. Like, it was really good.
Yeah, the board artists did an amazing job. And early on, they had a martial arts advisor, and they would take reference, and so they would see all the how all these moves would look and what they were called, and so that helped a lot. And I know the board artists was always be encouraged to watch old kung fu movies, watch Bruce Lee, watch more modern things like Ip Man and anything to kind of get what martial arts looks like in the real world, and then kind of apply it to the characters, and then just plus it. So it's like a little bit more than reality could have, but still looks real enough.
Oh yeah, and if you feel it, it's not goofy. Like, the action and the moves they do and all that, it's really well thought out.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Speaking of the first movie, and the one of the episodes you wrote, I was beyond thrilled when Tatsu showed up in Forgotten Swordsman. I was beside myself.
Oh yeah, that was great. That was because we wanted to do a new villain, and that was the thing where it was we were the villain of that that little mini series was Cavaxis. That was that was the dragon. But we're like, well, in episode 2, I got to do the Karai story against Karai's rebuilding the Foot Clan, and we needed to have a villain for that episode. I'm like, why don't we try to tease a new villain that's the villain that's going to take over the Foot Clan? And I actually had to I went back into the lore and was like, okay, who in the lore would be someone good to bring back? That's okay, we're doing someone that's going to take over the Foot Clan, that thinks that they're owed the Foot Clan, and then and I kind of went back into the comics and the movie, and I was like, oh, and it was and Tatsu was on the top of the list. I'm like, well, we got to bring him back somehow. That would be cool. And I think there was another character that I think we combined with him. That was from the comics, and I can't remember who that is now. I wish I'd done some research for it, but yeah, we'd kind of done. Can you combine Tatsu with somebody else to kind of get him? And it was like, oh, this is kind of cool. Where you have here's Tatsu again, and set it up in a way that it's okay, we totally think that he's going to be the next villain that Karai has to deal with the Foot Clan, and then immediately she defeats him, and then boom, Cavaxis kills him, and then
oh yeah,
then they realize the real thing. That was a hard episode to write, because that was trying to hold back the Cavaxis storyline just so I could tell that Karai story, and until the very last moment where all Karai's trying to do is just deal with this blind swordsman. She's just I just need to deal with this guy. This guy's trying to take over the Foot Clan. I don't care about anything else that's happening. And then she defeats him, and then Cavaxis shows up at the end. It's oh, this is happening now. Okay, I guess you guys weren't kidding.
I liked it because it was and I was just thrilled to have him in it, and using that, and you made it look just like the guy. I don't know his name, but he the fact that he looked like him, it kind of gave him that history, which you believe that he's part of the story, even if we didn't know that part.
Yeah, because there's always the idea that there's more Foot Clan out there, because Shredder in episode 1, or I guess it would be the end of episode 2, because it was the two-parter. Shredder's in Japan, and then he's all right, well, prepare my jet, I'm going to New York. And then it's well, he doesn't bring the entire Foot Clan with him. There's got to be people there, right? So what's that all about? And Karai was obviously in Japan until she showed up in episode 13 or whatever it was. So there was always the idea that well, there's Foot Clan back in Japan somehow, but no, we don't know who's really in charge of them. And that's and the idea was that Karai was in charge of them until that moment.
Oh yeah, and I mean I wish I remembered his name, but I'm I love the fact that it was like I said, as an old school fan, I was so thrilled that was the because he only exists in the movies, and every different iteration of the Turtles has their own kind of Shredder henchman. I mean, Karai is the same one, but each one has their own sort of thing. And for him to show up here, I was oh, I was such a treat for for me anyway. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, no, that was great. And even when I named him, I didn't expect them to try to make him really look like him, because you never know what they're able to do. But yeah, I thought that was a great little callback.
It was great. I was thrilled by that. So we talked a little bit about this before we were on the air, but you were saying that in some ways the kind of the season 4 finale was kind of meant to be like kind of the sort of series finale in a way.
In a way, because because that's kind of when we wanted to wrap up. I guess the finale in the sense that that's when the Shredder Splinter story was going to be concluded. So that was we kind of like gone as far as we could, and I think I know Ciro and Brandon really wanted to really just wrap up their story and be like, okay, we're going to complete kind of that bit of the lore and be like, okay, we're finishing off the Splinter, and then he was gonna die, and then they were gonna have to finally finish off Shredder for the last time, and then really kind of end the conflict with the Foot Clan at that point. And I think and this was a little earlier in the season, like as you're building out seasons, you don't know how many times you're going to get picked up for another season. So part of it had to do with we didn't know if we were going to get picked up for a season 5. Like that was still not that was still like a question mark. So as we were and you have to plan these things out so far in advance because of animation that I know they were like, let's part of it was like a just in case we don't get picked up, but also like it might be nice just to finish this up.
Yeah.
And then they started having ideas that like, well, if we're gonna do season 5, we should do and I think it was Ciro's idea, but Ciro and Brandon really wanted to do like Tales of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Like they wanted to do Tales of the TMNT, like from the comics days where you could just jump around. And so like, well, the idea was like, let's just finish off like almost like a comic book. Like let's finish off the regular run of the series here, and then the next season is going to be like same continuity, same characters, same world, but like now we're not just doing one story at a time. We're going to be jumping around a bit and telling more standalone stories. The idea was to do like, we're going to do like a little mini series, and then maybe like a one-off episode, and then like another mini series, but they were all going to be done in a way. And a part of that was I think I'm never part of these conversations because I was too far down the totem pole, but I think part of it was kind of an ask from the network that was like, it's easier to rerun these episodes if you don't have to do like always air them in continuity. So in order to kind of like do the have the best of both worlds, I think the idea was like, well, they can air them out of continuity, and then we're just going to do like little like 3 or 4 parters or one-off episodes that kind of can be aired in whatever episode in whatever order they wanted. And I think the only one that was like absolutely it needs to be aired. Well, we knew that like going in, we're like, oh well, the first episodes are going to be the kind of the tale of the Demo Dragon, which is the Cavaxis arc, which is he brings Shredder back from the dead. So like, well, the only place that could fit really in continuity would be like right after the season 4 finale. So obviously that's episode 1, and then they knew they wanted to do an After the Bomb, episode or miniseries, which. I can't remember if that came from Tales or if that was just in the role-playing game, but there was a role-playing game that was like After the Bomb that was like post-apocalyptic. And
oh yeah, I forgot all about that.
And that's kind of where like some of the idea would be like, oh, it would be cool to kind of do a story like that. So we're like, well, that's gonna be like the far future. So that's obviously like the end. So that's like the finale. So everything else in between was going to be like we're just mixing and matching, and that kind of gave us the opportunity to do the Splinter and Turtles origin that Kevin Eastman wrote. So that was really fun.
That's a great episode. So as a writer though, did you find that format like freeing in some ways, or like what was the ups and downs of that?
It was very liberating. I think in a way it was more difficult because it became, well, we really have to tell a self-contained story in one episode or in just like a mini series that you're not going to leave any threads or to dangle out for like further down the line.
Yep.
And so we had to be like really efficient about the storytelling, but on the other hand, we could kind of tell whatever we wanted. We're like, oh well, great! Like now we can do Usagi Yojimbo.
Yeah.
Now it's just like, and that was really easy to do because we could just start it in Usagi's world and then the turtles come into it, rather than have to be like, well, and now we're going to start in the city again and explain the turtles, and then somehow they meet Usagi and they go, and he comes into their world, they go into his world. We're like, no, we're just going to do it entirely in Usagi's world, and then the turtles arrive. And I love those. I didn't get a chance to write any of those, but those I love that arc because it was an Usagi Yojimbo show.
Yeah.
Just guest starring the turtles. Like,
yeah, that was cool.
Like, they come into the world, but like it was really he's the main character. Like it's his show. Like that whole time, I love that. That was great.
That was cool, and he looked great. Like it was like if only that could have been a spinoff, that'd be great.
Oh yeah, I mean, and I think there was a lot of stuff that, I mean, who knows what they have in the pipeline at Nickelodeon, concurrent with the new series coming out. But there were all these ideas of like, oh, well, let's do an episode here because we might be able to spin off an Usagi series, and these are I mean, this is not serious conversations. It's all just sort of like like blue sky and be like, oh, well, it'd be neat if they did this, but like because nobody's really really demanding it internally at Nickelodeon, but like as far as just sort of like having fun, in the office, or like, oh, it would be cool if they did like an Usagi series. Maybe this can be a way to do it, or it would be cool if they did a Bebop and Rocksteady series. So like here's a Bebop and Rocksteady episode, or it'd be cool to do like a Mutanimals series, or something like that. So I mean, and I don't even know if those are actually things that whether or not they're they're taken seriously or in development. But there's all of these things that were like, oh, we can do this, and we want to bring we knew we wanted to bring Mona Lisa back and bring the Neutralizer back, and it'd be cool to have like them have an adventure on Earth. And so there was all these ideas that we had, and like that Cyril wanted to do and Brandon wanted to do, and that I think were really fun doing that last season. So that was really freeing about it.
Was it so you were saying it was Cyril and Brandon who, like, it was them who decided to change the format to meet those, like, because you always figure from the outsider's perspective, like, oh, the network made them do this, and I actually liked the way it did it, but so it came from them, like, oh, we can really have a lot more fun with this.
I mean, that was my impression, but again, I wasn't in those conversations, because it's always like, that's why all the stuff I'm talking, I basically say it's mostly speculation, because
right.
I'm not in the room when that stuff happens, because like it's it would be Cyril and Brandon, and they'd go into the Nickelodeon offices, and they'd be talking about like, okay, well, what's your vision for season 5, and like because every season when they do a pickup, they're like, okay, if we're gonna pick you up, what's it gonna be? It's almost like you have to like pitch a new season and every time. And who knows? I mean, it could have been like they went and be like, we want to do this, or it could have been a demand. Like I can't
right.
confirm one way or the other. But that was that. I do know that they enjoyed doing that, so I can say that much. But I never know whose decision it was to do what. So
was it always known that would be the end?
I think so.
Okay.
There's always like like the hope that they're like, oh, we could always do more. It'd be great to do more, but I think once we got to season 5, it was like, well, this is cartoons don't last that long. Like it's rare that an animated show goes more than 4 seasons. It's more rare that an animated show goes more than 3 seasons. So the fact that we got the season 5 pickup, it was like, okay, this kind of feels like we might be doing the last season. And it was one of those things where like nobody really kind of discussed or talked about, other than like, do you think we'll have more? Like, I don't know, maybe, who knows? Like I think I think we all felt like in our heart of hearts, like, well, I think this is probably going to be the last one, but I don't think anybody really knew for sure until we got close to the end. So,
well, I mean, like from an outside, like as a fan, like people were like upset that the show was ending, and you look at the old Turtle show, it's 10 years, but that's a bizarre anomaly. Like the best cartoons ever, like were 3-4 seasons. Batman the Animated Series, like all these shows were only 3 or 4 seasons. So like the fact that Turtles got 120 some odd episodes, that's a ton of stories that you're able to tell.
It was more than that. It's like almost 200 episodes.
Oh, was it? Oh, wow.
Right? It's like over 10 seasons, like, I think.
Oh, I'm sorry. I mean, like, but even I'm saying the 2012 show, like.
Oh, you mean our show? Yeah.
You got to tell like all these episodes, like that. You got to tell so many great stories. Like it's to ask for more is like, we got it. We got a great show.
We got to do almost everything that we wanted to do, and honestly, like, you know, I think it was, you know, for the, you know, we were running out of stories to tell. Like, it's like once you hit, like, you know, 5 episodes of 5 seasons of a series, it's like, well, you're kind of running out of like things you can do. And I think that's why the Tales season 5 was like so freeing, because like, okay, well, now we can do all these stories that aren't hampered by like, oh, well, every time we're on this continuous arc, if we do like a little, like a standalone episode in the middle of that, then it kind of interrupts the flow with the story somehow. And I always like, you know, I think the fans got really frustrated when we do that sometimes. They'd be like, oh, what's this filler episode doing here? But I always like those episodes. I always like those episodes that would be like, okay, well, don't have to service like whatever the arc is that's happening. It's just like this little like one-off. Like, all right, that was kind of fun. That was like a fun episode.
I always hate that term filler episode. I mean, like, sometimes I think, like, you know, sometimes shows like Walking Dead, it feels like, all right, well, we didn't need that. But like, honestly, I feel like when it's like the term filler episode is like, no, we learned a lot about the characters in that one. Like, Lone Rat and Cubs, goodness, that's one of the best episodes of the series. And I mean, like, if anything's a filler episode, that would be.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like, I always hated that term, because it's like, you know, filler to me is like the stuff they put inside Twinkies. It's just there to take up space.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like a true filler episode of any TV show to me is like a clip show. It's like, oh,
yes.
It's like you literally need to like fill up airtime, and you don't have like an episode to do it in, so let's just do a clip show.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, to me, that's what a filler episode is.
Totally.
Like, you know, like, it's not just like, and because I think it is used as you know, as a pejorative, like, you know, they're not all, but I think there are some fans that are like, they just want to see the continuing story as though it's like you're just watching like a really long movie, and so anything that's like adjacent to that like, you know, kind of takes a step back and be like, we're going to tell like this little character story, or we're going to tell like this little fun story, like they just think it's like a waste of time somehow, or that, you know, oh, we're just like, you know, can't come up with anything, so we're just going to do this, and be like, well, everything is like an effort to write. Everything is an effort to board and animate. So it's like, it's not like we're just like phoning it in for you know, for an episode that takes like a year and a half to produce. So
yeah, that's crazy, because I mean, like, some of the best episodes too, like Lone Rat and Cub, Mondo Gecko is one of my favorite episodes, and that's just like one little funny story. Pizza Face, that
one's great. I love Mondo Gecko. It's so 80s. It's just a throwback episode. And Pizza Face, that is like one of my favorite episodes.
Me too. It's great.
I laugh at that one so much, and I know that people are really. I think there are some fans, I think, that are very divided on that episode. Like,
oh, really?
There's some fans that love it, and there's some fans that just hate that episode. And I'm like, it's fun. It's just a fun, like, silly episode with like Mikey just fighting a giant pizza man. Like,
yeah. I love that one.
What's not to love about that?
Yeah.
Like, you know, he has like I think there's 2 songs in it or something, right? Like he's got his little like rap or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
You know, like, it's fun. Like, I like that episode. That one's fun.
Mikey had a lot of those good ones. Mondo Gecko, the one where they went in Mikey's brain. Like, they had some good standalone filler episodes of Mikey that are some of the best episodes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, like the Neutrino episode where they go in Mikey's mind. Oh, man, that one was fun. That one was so much fun.
I've always been a Donnie guy, but I feel like, had I not grown up, like, if I'd grown up now, Mikey might be my favorite. Like,
yeah, Mikey was great at the show, and I gotta give a lot of props to Greg Sipes, because he gave it such a great performance every time. Like, he was such a fun actor. But yeah, I mean, I love all of them. Like, I was like grew up loving Donnie. So.
Oh, you were a Donnie guy?
Yeah, I was always a Donnie guy, but that's I mean, that was just me. I was just like a big, tall, lanky nerd, so yeah. Like, that's what worked for me.
I talked to Rob Paulson recently for this, and I was like, I still go back. I was so thrilled when they cast him as Donnie. I was like, and then he was fantastic as Donnie. He was great.
He was so good.
Yeah.
And people were so used to him being, you know, Raphael on the 80s show. They're like, well, how is that going to work? But like, it worked out. Like,
yeah.
There is. And I love that moment when we did the crossover, and it's like you have, like, you know, Rob Paulson talking to Rob Paulson as Donnie and Raphael, and you're like, oh, there's a slight difference in like the cadence. It's just like just a slight, like his voice is the same, but there's just like a slight difference in his cadence that you're like, okay, yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, he was a great Donnie. Like, and his Donnie was very different. Like, he was nerdy and cocky, but it was I love him as both. He was fantastic.
Yeah, he was my favorite. I loved him.
I think that about wraps things up. I'm going to ask a question that I don't think you'll be able to answer, but okay. Who dropped the mutagen bomb?
No one. That was I blame the Krang for that, man.
Okay.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I don't think we ever really figured that. I'm gonna leave that up to speculation.
All right.
So it could have been the. So when I think about it, I'm like, well, I don't know if the Krang came back. So, because the Krang were the Utrom were freed, so maybe it's not the Krang. So, I don't know. I never really thought about it because I was like, well, that was always going to be a mystery, but that would be a fun story to tell. Like, who dropped the mutagen bomb?
I follow Ciro Nieli's Instagram, and I think at some point he's like, oh, I'd like to tell that story at some point, like in a comment or something. Because I saw people arguing on his Instagram that it was a what if episode, and he's saying like, no, it's the finale. I would know. Like,
yeah.
If anybody knows, it's him.
Yeah, and that's one of those things where it's like, it's all fiction anyway. So like, if you want to believe that it's a what if episode, that's I think that's totally valid. But yeah, I mean, it was designed to be like, that's like the future it is, and. But yeah, I don't know. I think that's just probably in Ciro's mind. Whoever dropped the mutagen bomb, I always thought that somehow maybe the Krang came back, or maybe some rogue mutants got a hold of mutagen, or I don't know. That's a good question for speculation. Yeah, I can't. Obviously I can't answer that for real. But whatever you think it is until Ciro tells that story.
It was Pigeon Pete. That's what it was. That's
what I should have said. I should have said Pigeon Pete.
That's it.
Pigeon Pete's revenge.
Yeah, exactly. That's why we don't talk about him, because he went mad and built a mutagen bomb.
That's why we don't talk about him. He went bad, and it's like he's locked up in like the in the cells in the older dimension or something like that, and then he breaks out and
exactly.
He's like, I'm gonna get you all.
Well,
that's such an 80s cartoon thing too, where there's like the character that just like you never see again, and then they come back and they're like this villain, and you're like, wait, you were this goofy thing. And
this pensive nerd. Baxter Stockman's the perfect example. Like this little
Stockman, where you're like, oh yeah, he's just like I'm trying to. I think I feel like I'm derailing the conversation, but I remember like watching that again recently, and it'd be like, wait, like Baxter's just kind of like. He's just like this out-of-work scientist that just can't sell his stuff on. Like all he's trying to do is just like go on like the Home Shopping Network and sell his little toy robots. Like that's all he wants to do. And then like Shredder just picks him up and like, oh, you know how to build robots. I'm gonna make you do some stuff. And then somewhere along the way he turns evil, and you're like, all right, I guess that works.
Yeah, like especially the old show. He's just a sort of like unfortunate misanthrope that like gets wrapped into this whole universe.
Yeah, it's like he never asked. It's like, I mean, like in every other version of like Baxter Stockman, like he is like a bad guy in some way. Like,
he's a jerk. Yeah,
crime. Like he wants to take over the world, or he wants to use Mouse just to rob banks or something like that. But the Baxter Stockman of the '80s show is just sort of like, I just want to build robots, man. Like I don't know how I got wrapped. I don't know how I got into this mess.
It's so sad. Like it's just, and then he bonds with that. I don't know if you remember the later series. He like made a friend out of this living computer thing, and he like.
Oh my god! I totally forgot about that. Yeah. The computer, which he makes a friend with.
He's just his friend.
And that was. I remember and when I was a kid, I remember seeing them. Like basically, at the end of every episode, he somehow gets like vaporized or like transported like between, like not even to Dimension X. Like he would get transported between dimensions, and so like he would just be like
in limbo,
trapped like in limbo forever. Like and it would happen like all the time.
Yeah.
And you're like, all right, well, I guess we're just he's just like stuck. Like I don't know what he does for food, but. And then it's like him and the little computer chip that's like it was, and that was confusing because it was like an AI. It was like it was something like Skynet kind of thing.
Yeah.
It was like AI and a computer, and he has like but then it turns into like a portable computer somehow, with a face on the screen. Like there was that show had some wacky stuff in it. That was weird.
You know what's funny is, and I've never done this, but now I really want to, is just to go back and watch only his episodes. It's probably the most depressing story arc of any character.
Yeah, just tell like his story from his point of view and be like, oh, like he's just like, you know, he's like this scientist and he's down on his luck and he's just trying to build robots and he just wants to like sell toys or whatever, and it's like everyone's like no, and then like he gets kidnapped by Shredder, and then he's forced to like do all this stuff, but like, why me? What did I do? Like I didn't ever hurt anybody. Now I'm like, you know, like this criminal like that's trying to like kill mutant turtles all the time.
Do you remember Barney Stockman?
No.
Okay, so
I don't remember Barney Stockman.
There's an episode of the old show where Raphael wants to become a stand-up comedian, and he and other stand-up comedians are doing like this improv hour or whatever it is, and like they're all kind of like Jackie Mason type comedians or like, you know, Alan King, like archetypes of real comedians, and he and those comedians are kidnapped. And I forget who the bad guy is. I think it's like the gangster bad guy. And it's Baxter, and he's back as a human, not a fly. And it turns out it's his twin brother with the exact same personality and the exact same knowledge base. And he creates this machine that like hypnotizes the whole city. But Barney is like continuously mad that people keep calling him Baxter, and he's Barney Stockman, and it's this ridiculous story.
That's funny. I don't think I remember that one. I'll have to go look that one up somehow.
Yeah, it's just, I think they just wanted Baxter back for an episode. Like, oh wait, he's a fly. It's his brother. Whatever. Like,
yeah.
So, you know, Peter, this was a lot of fun. I really appreciate this.
Oh yeah, sure. Glad to do it. Yeah, hopefully I could be, you know, get a little bit. I feel like I went on a couple of rambles and rants, but yeah, I was glad to do it. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, that's the fun of it. We was talking to Ken Mitchroney, who's one of the early artists, and we talked about Jack Benny for half the time. It was like complete sidebars. So
yeah. Oh, that's okay. Usually my conversations usually just devolve into like talking about like Star Wars and Transformers. So I feel like it's pretty good that I'd managed to not talk about them until now.
All right, cool. Well, you know, Peter, that kind of covers it. Thank you so much. I also want to say a thank you to the the Turtle Flakes podcast, who we're doing this podcast in conjunction with, and that about wraps it up. So thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Take care.
All right, thanks.
Get right with the shell shock pizza kings. Can't stop these radical dudes. The secret of the ooze made the chosen few emerge from the shadows to make their move. The good guys win and the bad guys lose. Leonardo's a leader in blue. Does anything it takes to get his ninjas through. Donatello is a fellow, has a way with machines. Raphael's got the most attitude on the team. Michelangelo, he's one of a kind, and he knows where to find him when it's party time.